Hey, shalom and welcome to Wisdom and Torah Ministries and also WIT-Talmidim. My name is Rico Cortez, and we are making a comeback of sorts here. We're coming back to some of these topics that we like to cover for Teshuvah. Sorry, I just did a teaching on Teshuvah.tv for WIT-Talmidim. We have Daniel, we have Matthew, we have Ryan, Tyler, and RC. Say hello, guys.
Hey.
Say hello. Okay, good.
Hey, everybody.
Now, what we wanted to do is come back and come together, but instead of doing a particular teaching, we want to give you an idea how we study. So many people asked us, how do we do certain things? And one of the things I tell people is peer review. And in a peer review, we have a group of people. In this case, you're looking at them. We have also Joe Good, Dina Dye. We have Joel Sanchez. We have Walter Agosto, Gabriel Paredes. We have a whole bunch of other people that I work with and that I bounce things off. And I basically, when we do teachings, Daniel and Ryan knows that we get together, we talk about this. We haven't done that lately because we've been so busy doing different things. But normally when we're going to do something and we study, if I need anything, I call my friends, my brothers, my mentors, my teachers, and we exchange. We come together because everything that we prepare, we want to make sure that is right, that is correct. With all of the things happening right now and all the confusion and all the information that we've learned, that we've come to realize that a lot of it was incorrect, that a lot of it was not verified. You know what I mean? It was not verified the proper way. And we don't want to continue to propagate a lie. We want to be able to be honorable and to let you know, well, this is the way it was done, but this is what we found. So basically what we try to do in WIT-Talmidim is a group of guys and ladies who get together and we co-labor with one another and we keep each other accountable. But there are ways in which we do things. And today, when we do some teachings, it's not like I'm going to go out there with all the books that I have behind me, and then all of a sudden I'm just going to, I figure something out, and then throw it against the wall hoping that something will stick. I've decided that I no longer want to be that kind of teacher. 6 years ago, my world was turned upside down, and I began to study 5 years ago ancient Near Eastern studies. And I got to tell you, every single one of you, if it wasn't because I had the help of Ryan and Daniel at that time, and now I got the help of Matthew and Tyler and some other people. If it wasn't because I had this guy's help, I don't think I would have been able to be balanced, and I don't really think I would have been able to really be able to decipher all the stuff that we were learning. That at times I'm considering, what in the world did I get myself into? So to me, having a group of teachers that we can put our egos aside. Do we all want to be right? Absolutely, we want to be right. But is it really about us being right, or about the king being right? And that's what we focused in. And Daniel and Ryan, hey, I have my little powwows with Ryan. There are times we've been arguing about certain points, and we never disrespect one another, but we agree and disagree. But then, I gotta say it, there've been a few times, more than twice, that I had to look at Ryan and say, you know what, man, you were right. You presented your case, you established your foundation, and you were completely correct. It was just we are learning how to convey the message so that you will be edified, so that you will be uplifted, and that you and I will be educated. And I think our biggest problem, and you ask anyone here, and our biggest problem is now not to send the message of, oh, we know the context, we know everything, you guys don't know anything. That's the biggest problem we have, is how do we convey the message in a way that is educational, without having to bash you with the head over with it and to make you feel like we are all ignorant. When in fact, every single one of us are learning. We depend on one another, and we want to edify, we want to build up the kingdom, we don't want to destroy it. So with that being said, what I'd like to do, whoever wants to start first, they're going to tell you how their process of study goes through, and then after they're done, then I'll conclude it by letting you know what I go through and the importance of having a team like this, to help me as a teacher balance out the information so that when I present it to you, it's been to a peer review. And sadly, in the Hebraic roots understanding, there's not enough of that. Too many egos, sad to say. We're so afraid of being wrong, we don't put ourselves to a peer review. And by the way, if you ask any of this person that I so highly respect and admired, they don't tell me what I want to hear. They tell me what I need to hear. And I don't want people next to me studying with me who are going to basically tell me what I want to hear and whatever I say goes. No, ladies and gentlemen, this is about Yahweh. It's about Him. We want Him to get all the honor. We want Him to get all the praise. We want Him to get all the glory. And if I have to change, and if I have to adapt, and if I have to say I was wrong and I'm sorry, I'll make it better, then so be it. You know, and I expect them to be the same. So with that being said, who wants to take over for a little bit and continue? Anybody? 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 Okay. Okay, Tyler. I know that you have this gift of writing, and I know now. I'm noticing. Listen. I know that these people here have a lot of talents and gifts. Okay, more so than I do. I mean, I can't write a lick. I can't write anything. When I start writing, I confuse myself. Okay. Now Tyler has that gift. I'm reading a lot of the stuff that also Ryan is writing. He's also a good writer, and I know Daniel is. I haven't had a chance to read anything that Matthew has put out, but I will get there. But this is an area that I want to learn from. All right. So Tyler, well, what people would like to know, because you are a beast when it comes to writing. All right. You're like mad crazy. All right. You can write a book in a week. Okay, tell me, how in the world can that be feasible, and what is your thought process and your preparation in order for that to happen? Now, knowing that not everybody's going to be able to write a book in a week, but when you write it, it's not because you're just making things up, because you do truly prepare yourself, and I really respect that. And that's why I like to call you also a teacher in my life, and I want to thank you for that. Go ahead, Tyler. Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Okay. I guess I'll bring up the one that is the reason why you and I met. I had been your student for years, and I'm so shy, which is hard to believe when you're hearing me talk, but I never told Rico that I was even studying with him, and then teaching homeschool one day, and I was sitting teaching the boys 1 Samuel 22, and I knew I needed to write a book on Rico's teaching of Paul as an immigration attorney. But I knew I needed to start with the covenant, all the covenant knowledge that he'd been teaching. But the problem was, I'd just been listening to the videos, and that's not studying. So I had to dig in deep. I had to get all of the documents that he had. I had to get all the books. I had to read them all. I had to verify everything that he was teaching. I had to know it deep down. And then once I started to get it, I contacted Rico, and he was willing to provide me with any help that I needed, but I had to fill myself with all that information so that when it came time to write it, I could just kind of pour it out on paper. But until I'd actually, read everything, verified everything, followed all the wild goose chases, and Rico, you need to turn your mic off. Or no, RC, you need to turn your mic off. Yeah, when I'm going to write something, I've got to understand it in a really, really deep way, or I can't write about it at all. But what Rico was saying with what he does with the holding himself accountable, what was it, November, Rico, October, where you came to me with a Novus Homo thing, and you said, would you look into this for me? I'd never heard of it. He just said the words, and I said, all right. So immediately I go on to JSTOR, which is one of jstor.org, which is one of the sites where we get articles. Went to academia.edu, just the different scholarly, and I look for this Novus Homo. And I start finding this information, and there wasn't much. and I researched it, and I wrote down what I saw, because Rico didn't tell me anything about what he saw.
It was a hint.
Yeah, it was a hint. He didn't want to prejudice me. He didn't want me to just tell him. He didn't want me to tell him what he already thought. And so I wrote down everything I saw, and then we're on the phone and we're going, oh my gosh, this is really, really cool. And anyway, that was the process. And yes, I agreed with Rico on everything. But if I hadn't,
you would have told me.
Yeah.
That's the whole idea. By the way, yeah. The article that you did on that was outstanding. You were able to put it in words in the article that I don't think I would have been able to do. By the way, I need that article on your resources, because I revisited that and I remembered you that you did the work on that. So I need that now to help me go over it, because I want to teach on Ephesians chapters 2, and that piece of information when everybody says, well, we are now a new man, they have no idea really what Paul was trying to convey, and that we are taking it completely out of, again, context. So, by the way, do you know that the same thing happened to me a long time ago? I'm listening to a Torah teacher that I have, and he gave a hint on a particular chapter of a Torah, Sotah. And I went back and I did just what you did. I went over and I researched everything on Numbers 5, and I found this wealth of information, and that's where the teaching on the bitter waters came from. So anyway, keep going.
Well, I don't know what else to say. I mean, I get it inside me, and I mean, I'm a scientist, I'm a chemist, but I've always been able to write ever since I was a little girl.
So let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question, because I think it is important that we mention to people the resources of the articles. By the way, JSTOR, that's one of the ones that you mentioned. I have down there, I have like binders of articles that I was buying at $9, $14 a pop. I see them, right? I just got blessed that Ryan, by the way, again, this is how we help one another. Ryan is a student. So he says, hey, by the way, bro, I can get those articles for free because I'm a student. So therefore, I will tell him what I needed, and he will pass them on to me. Then I became a student, so I could go into a lot of the stuff. So again, that's how we help one another. And I think we've read, if I'm right, Daniel and Ryan, maybe over 400 articles, maybe more, 500, that we've read in the last 5-6 years alone. That's only the articles. That's not the books behind me right here. All of those are the ancient Near East and those right here. So like I see right now in your bookshelf, and I see the Sundervan, and I see some of the other resources you have. So what we need to do today, as you are explaining how your process of learning goes, share with people the resources that you use. If you can write them down later on, we put it on Facebook so people can maybe consider those things and access those, and they can look for themselves.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, right there, if you see on my little file cabinet, those are, you got to stack there. That is what I'm studying actively right now for writing my children's book. That's what I've got right now. Then there's what I'm studying to prepare for the honor and shame in the temple class that I'm teaching this weekend, and I'm reading 6 books all at the same time. It's, you know, this is what we do. This is what we all do. I can't hear you, Rico. Rico.
Yeah, and by the way, this is exactly what I mean. Is like we're able to share some of this stuff, and I see all the books that you're reading. A lot of them I have. We recommend books to one another, and that's the one thing that I want to recommend to everybody. Everybody that's listening to us, I don't hide information from these people. Like what you got? Hey, I don't have that one. The book of Leviticus on top. Who is it?
Wenham.
Who is it from?
G.J. Wenham.
Oh, I don't have that one. So I got to make sure. Let me know how you like it. And you know, so what we do is Ryan and Daniel and Matthew. I still remember Matthew when I told him about ancient Near East. I visited North Carolina, and I was going to teach him on adoption, and he was really gravitated to it. And then I don't know what I mentioned to him. I said something that really piqued an interest, and he went off of that. And what I like is the fact that every single one of us now have a different niche within the ancient Near Eastern perspective. Like, you know, Ryan has spent thousands of hours of sacrifices, you know, and Matthew, he has a congregation, so he makes it to like everyday application, and you love kids because of special needs kids that you have, and now you are applying everything we're learning. By the way, I want everybody to know exactly what you're doing with Ancient Near Eastern research and the books and the target audience. Will you let them know to whom you're really targeting?
Yeah, in August, the thrust of my ministry completely changed, and I stopped mostly teaching adults. The only reason I teach adults now is I'm teaching parents so that they can equip their kids with the more difficult questions from the Torah that I can't legally teach their kids. I am doing a curriculum series for homeschoolers, and that's really going well. I got a great review from a university professor who read my Honor and Shame in the Bible. Yeah.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you. I was kind of shocked. And I sent a copy of my book to Jason Georges, of course, over at honorshame.com. And he's got a bunch of little girls, so he's going to take them through it. And I'm writing Honor and Shame Volume 2, or Context for Kids Volume 2 right now, the 10 Commandments and the Covenants of Promise. And I'm going to take, I started, I've got 3 weeks of curriculum written now. And I've got a video series on YouTube. It's Context for Kids YouTube channel, and I do every week. I'm doing the Torah portions this year. Next year, it's going to be all first century context, and having a good time.
Well, so let me ask you one more question before I move on to Matthew. Is as you were learning this, what was it that prompted you to say, you know, adults know this, or maybe they don't get it. Let me make this into the, because, you know, taking all this information and making it into a curriculum for kids is not an easy task. You know,
much harder than teaching adults. Much harder. Has to be far more logical. You cannot make any leaps. You can't just count on them to pretend they're understanding. If they don't understand, they will tune out. They are not interested.
So
it wasn't my idea.
But what we need to do, I think, is completely continue support and equip what you're doing, anything that you need, completely for us to work with you, because you have the niche that, honestly, I could teach young men, but I'm not really, my ministry is not focused on the homeschoolers. Even though, by the way, the teaching that I have on the 12 hours of Ancient Near Eastern Studies is being used by homeschool moms all over the United States. For what I hear, they're using it as history. And I feel that's great, but still, there's a huge demographic that we don't really target, and those are the kids. And again, what we need to do is to get you to Orlando for that big homeschool conference they got over there, because I think that will really help them out. All right, so Tyler, thank you so much for your gift, and we really value what you do, and I want to thank you for taking everything that we're doing and researching and verifying it, keeping us honest. One thing we know about you, that if we are full of it, you tell us. So anyway, I appreciate your honesty. And
yeah, and vice versa. If I'm full of it, you're more than willing to get on the phone.
Absolutely. But that's all I love, by the way. Anyway,
yes, it is. I know.
And let me move on to Matthew here, and I'd like to get his impression of how he became more interested in the Ancient Near East, and how did that change your mindset and your walk in the Torah.
Oh, geez. You guys hear me okay? I guess so. Cool. So yeah, Rico, as you were talking about, I think it was a teaching on adoption, which actually changed my life when it really hit home after I adopted Benjamin. But that's a different story. And regardless, we were at a conference back in like the 2011 or 12 or something, and I finally came to you and I was like, listen, Rico, I've been following you for a while. We've known each other for, off and on for a while. I will start studying this stupid Near Eastern stuff that you're on board with and no one else is touching. Fine, I'll do it. Where do I start? And you recommended a Leviticus commentary. Not that you fully endorsed everything in it, of course not. But you said start there because he makes a lot of points. And you're going to reach around for it, and I have it here. Here we go. It's right over here. Yeah, because
I got his big volumes. You have the little one, right?
Oh no, I got the little one. I ain't got time for all that mess.
Man, when we were doing the Ancient Near East, we were reading through this, and then Ryan goes, "Hey, by the way, he has a short version. that when you hold me, I say, you what? After I read almost everything. It's very in depth. Go ahead, bro.
I couldn't imagine. So I got this commentary, and I always like to warn people. One thing you're going to realize is when we name commentaries, we do not fully endorse everything that is in these books, like as religion. There's a lot of stuff in this book that I laugh at, that he even has hypothesis on and theories on, but he's good at what he's good at, and that is studying the sacrificial system, and as Ryan puts it, blood manipulation in Leviticus. And so I went home, and Rico didn't realize that I had been struggling with something in my faith for 6 years, and that something in my faith was, what were the mechanics of what Yeshua did on the cross? I know that's like 101, right? You know, or he died for you on the well, how does it work? And Rico, when I read the introduction to this book on my front porch, I started crying because I've been praying every single day, Father, I'm pursuing you. I just wish I could have the answers to the mechanical function of what Yeshua did in the cross. And the introduction to this commentary led me to the answers to my prayer, and now I'm more solidified in my faith than ever because I understand a little bit more about what Yeshua did. And so that is the point in time when I was like, maybe Rico hasn't fallen off the deep end with studying all this Near Eastern stuff. This is one of the many books. This was the first one I've gotten, and I still reference it today. Like I said, don't recommend a lot of stuff in it, of course. But then the concept of peer review went on, as Rico's saying, and something that we don't like to talk about in Hebrew Roots is the fact that there's a lot of pride in Hebrew Roots, especially among people who want to teach. You know, we want to teach something, and we want it to be our idea, and you know, we go online and we see someone's teaching, and we take it back to our fellowship, or we make our own video version of it, or we change something, and then we just regurgitate every single thing that we saw someone else teach, and they never gave us any references to confirm what they say or validate what they say, and so therefore we're left with no references to validate what we say, and then we get called out on the information that we present, and it's lacking. And guys, there's a lot of stuff in Hebrew Roots that discredit what we're trying to teach in the long run, and that is to solidify the gospel of Yeshua. And so what the Talmidim team does is we come together, guys. We do come together. We talk almost every day amongst ourselves. Hey, guys, I'm studying this. And so when I want to study something, first thing I do is I start with a page like academia.edu, try to look for a PhD written essay on whatever I'm trying to do to get an overview of what I'm looking at. I'll search for books online. I'll read 1 or 2 books or essays. And then what I'll do is after I read a couple books, I'll reach out to someone like Ryan, who has read a whole bunch of books, and I'll say, Ryan, this, and he may or may not recommend a book or 2 or 100, and I'll read those books, and then I'll go to someone like Tyler and be like, Tyler, I know you probably spent like 50 hours on this topic. What books do you recommend? And then I'll read those books. The same thing for Daniel and Rico and so on and so forth. And after I've read all of these books and all these recommended books, then I will form whatever message I have, hypothesis, theory, whatever I want to pitch, and then I'll go back in the group and I'll say, hey guys, this is what the angle that I've come to on this specific topic, and they'll either agree with me and say, yeah, that's how I see it, or you know, they'll call me a moron and say, you totally missed the point, Matt. You need to start over.
But you know what's funny is that so the audience will get an idea. It's that you didn't mention me first. It's not like you're going to call me and say, Rico, what do you think? You go to certain people that specialize in certain areas.
Sure.
Because we recognize that we're a team. Like every time somebody talks about, like I always keep saying, the best teaching I've ever heard on Isaiah 53, Ryan has it. The best teaching that I have on micro and macro in the cosmology and the gospel is Daniel, and also the messenger, the angel of the covenant, the royal messenger. And now, it's interesting. I'm going to tell you a little later how we gave those assignments. But if you want to know sacrifice, and I've been studying the temple 18 years, I really feel that Ryan has a better handle on them because he spent a lot of time in them. And by the way, this is what we're trying to do with one another. So it's nice to know that you can feel comfortable going to every single one of us in order to feel like you're learning, to feel like you're going to be challenged. So it's like now when you study, what is your mindset? Like you go to all those resources, but what is really your mindset when you do all these studies?
my mindset is to understand what I'm trying to learn. So a great idea is I wanted to learn about Canaanite history, right? And so I started studying about what do we know about Canaanite mythology, because there's a lot of stuff that's actually taught incorrectly in Hebrew about Canaanite mythology and on the internet about Babylonian Canaanite mythology and stuff. And one of the books I ran across was it's one of my favorite books. It's Stories from Ancient Canaan. In 1929, they discovered a whole bunch of tablets, and they translated tablets of what ancient Canaanites believed. And so this is an actual source of what ancient Canaanites believed in what 15 or 18 stories. We can find out who Ishtar was, who Dagon was, who Baal was. Baal-Hadad was his name. His name wasn't Baal. Baal, Lord, is not pagan, regardless. And so after I actually have a source, something that I'm studying, these actual tablets, then I'll start studying commentaries on those tablets. And if my purpose on studying something is to understand the topic, right? So let's say I wanted to learn about Baal and who Baal was and what Elijah was throwing a fit about in that mountain, I would start with something like this. And then I would go further with different commentaries, a JPS commentary or Anchor Bible Dictionary, and I would definitely reach out to Tyler. Tyler studies Babylonian history, which has a lot of similarities to Canaanite history. And, we'll bump heads from time to time, and I'll be like, yeah, I don't see it that way, but I also have to understand that whatever she sees, she has a valid reason to do, or she has a valid point. And that's one thing that I've learned more in the Wisdom and Torah Talmidim group, more than any other association I've ever been part of, is that when we go into a room, we can pitch ideas, and someone can tell me that, listen, Matt, I don't see it that way. Look at all this evidence to support my point of view. And it doesn't hurt my feelings because I can ask them, okay, I completely understand that, and I love that opinion. Does my point of view have any weight? And if the answer is yes, then we have to agree that both opinions have weight and we can come together. And so the mindset is to validate every single thing that we study and not just Google search it or depend on one teacher on the internet who doesn't give any sources. Rico's the only teacher, one of the teachers I most honor, because as you guys know, he'll start holding up 30 different books. Say, look at this, look at this, look at this. This is where I got that. So we can actually go back and verify what he's saying.
By the way, Matthew, thank you, but I cannot take credit for that because you know who I learned that from? Joseph Good. 7 years ago, almost 7 years ago, 6 years ago. Wow, it's been so long. I'm watching one of his videos for the first time, and they told me all about him. So I've been, when there's always hearsay and you don't really know a person. So you just pick certain things and say, well, let me see what he has to say about this topic. So I was staying on the safe side. I went to temple stuff, right? But then what he would do, he would start the class with a topic, and he goes, by the way, this teaching here, I got from here, go to the page and look it up, and then, oh, I don't have that book, let me order it. So what I do the same thing too. It's like, you want to know about ancient Orient and the Old Testament, Kitchen, K.A. Kitchen was pretty good. So, I mean, these books, a lot of them are not even printed anymore. You don't want to know how much we spend on this stuff, all right? And Joe will go and start quoting all these things, and I go in and I get it and I see it. So now I'm going like, oh, wow, that's cool. And I really thought, man, that really gave him a lot of credibility in my eyes because it told me, like, he is not reinventing the wheel. He has some connections that I never knew, even that the writer wasn't making. Like I did the teaching on the lake of fire. You know that teaching about resurrection. Well, I learned it from this book right here. It's called Everyday Life in Ancient Mesopotamia, and then I verified it with the Hammurabi Law, and I verified it with some of the ancient documents, and it became, it goes like that. And then you talked about Canaan, and there's a verse that says, and what triggered me to study all this stuff was the verse that says that don't do what the nations surrounding Israel do. Don't worship like the Canaanites and the Egyptians and those people. So I figured, hey, how do we know what they did so we don't do it? So it's clear to me that Egypt, Canaan, and Israel in ancient times is a very important subject because Israel came out of Egypt and they were going to Canaan. So it's only logical that I want to know what in the world was going on, how they lived, the agriculture. Now, does it mean that I agree with everything, or have I read the whole book? But I'm pretty sure I've read like 2 or 3 chapters. I just don't remember how many books I read anymore, And then we have this book that I got in England there was a gentleman who was moving, and I was doing the teaching on ancient covenants, right? And he had bookshelf. He's moving out of the country, and he had this bookshelf that he had all the books, and he was going to move, giving them away. Man, he had a whole bunch of books of ancient Near East. I'm in England. I can't carry many books because it's too much weight. But they have this one that I've never seen before. You know, it's called Legend, The Genesis of Civilization by David Roll. I don't know much about the writer, but it's interesting. When I started sifting through the pages, what do I find? All the evidence of ancient Near Eastern covenants and how they worked. And that's exactly my PowerPoint. So what did I do to the audience who never met me before? I said, guys, this is the information I found here, 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 but I just went to that bookshelf over there and I got this book. Let me read you on page such and such. And what it did, it gave me instant credibility with a lot of the people in the audience, because now it's not just me saying it. What I'm doing is making connections. Let me go through a few books, and then I'm going to pass it on back to Matthew, and then to Ryan, to Daniel, and then I finish with Ryan. This book right here, I think, should be really a good tool. It's called Reading Egyptian Art. I really would recommend it. This book right here can take any aspect of Egyptology and explains to you what it meant to them. You'll find some amazing nuggets. Listen, when you go through this book and then you see that the Lord says, I'll bring you on eagle's wings, you know exactly what Yahweh is trying to tell Israel by saying that. You know, when you read this book, or you read some of the Egyptian art hieroglyphs, and then you know that the Lord told Moses, Moses, take your staff and tell Aaron to throw it at the feet of the Pharaoh's court. You know exactly that what the Lord is trying to convey by by turning into a serpent and the god Uraeus of the Egyptian, you know, lower and upper Egypt. Anyway, things like that. This is another book that was written. I read this whole thing and I found it really, really good. It's about Leviticus, but I went from a different direction. It's called The Priestly Laws and Prohibitions from the Perspective of Ancient Near Easterns and Africa by Johnson M. Muhu. I think it's a really good book. What I come to realize, you know, when in the book of Job, when he's going through the testing, that he says, and my eyes will not behold the virgin. I will keep my eyes. Let me look at the verse. Let's go there real quick. I think it's Job 30 or Job 31. See if I find it. Because that always puzzled me. Because it seemed kind of weird when he says, I made covenant with my eyes that will not look at something. Do you guys remember that verse? That's okay. Don't help me, guys. I got it. Do you guys know the verse that I'm talking about? That I made covenant with my eyes and I will not look at something? Anybody? You guys leaving me hanging here? Nice peer review group I got. Thank you, guys. Anyway, so I'll look for it later. But I come to realize that what it's talking about is a goddess of the ancient Mesopotamian mythology. You know, I make covenant with my eyes. I'm not going to look at the virgin. So who's the virgin? Well, you go back to the ancient world. He is saying, I'm not going to worship other gods. I'm going to be focusing on you. Anyway, and also we have the Sunderland Illustrated Bible Commentary, and by far my favorite. It's one of my favorite by John Walton. By the way, he has great stuff on cosmology. You want to understand the book of Genesis and its function? Really, really good stuff. And then the Bible Background Commentary of the Old Testament by John Walter Chavalis and Matthews and Mark Chavalis. And if you can't afford any of these books, then you can get the Archaeological Study Bible. I know Daniel liked this one. I like it too. I don't like the version. It's an NIV. But the nuggets that you see there, man, is really, really good. If you don't have time to study this stuff, and you only go on our website, but you can get the Archaeological Bible, and it'll give you a lot of stuff. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yes?
Job 31:1.
Joe what?
Job 31:1.
I knew you would respond. Thank you. Got all the scholars here. It leaves me hanging. Let's go to Job 31:1. Can you read it?
My eyes, how then could I gaze at a virgin?
Now, if you continue, you know, reading the whole chapter, it just doesn't make any sense. He's connecting different things, and now he's talking about a virgin. You know, when you go back, and that book kind of points out, trying to talk about Job, he's talking about the distinction. Let me give you an example. You know that verse, the psalm that says, when I look to the hills, from where does your salvation come from? Salvation comes from where does your help come from, right? Salvation comes from the Lord who created the heavens and the earth. Well, I mean, I always thought about that psalm kind of strange. I'm thinking, well, was the Levi, the poetic, and Ryan can really talk about this. He's doing some research on the book of Psalms. But did we ever consider the high places in Israel? High places where they have gods? And then all of a sudden the Levites are looking to the high places and says, from where does your help come from? And then he's making the contrast. He's saying, it comes from the Lord who created the heavens and the earth, not the idols on the high places. And that psalm now takes a complete different dimension when you understand it from its time frame and the contrast that the Levites are trying to make. Go ahead, Matthew. Anything you would like to add?
Yeah, the only thing I would ask or advise people when when you're starting to seriously study. And when I say seriously study, I'm not saying look at a Facebook meme and develop a teaching. And I'm not saying just go to a website that, you know what I'm talking about. Everyone watching knows what I'm talking about. Ooh, look, Facebook said it. Guys, Facebook is not always right. Someone was asking me about information about the Rosh Hashanah tablets, the tablets discovered in Canaan 1929, that book that I was just on. And I was telling them about it, and they sent me a book that they found on Amazon that they were fixing to buy that spoke about these tablets. And they sent me the link, and I looked at the book, and on the back of the book were aliens. Now, guys, if you're wanting to seriously study archaeology and anthropology from PhD professors of universities, people who have put a lot of time and effort into this, please don't buy a book that has aliens on it and is sitting here talking about Nephilim or the Anakuni, whatever, the Assyrian angel connection, all this mess. That's probably not a good place to set a foundation for a Near Eastern Bible study. And we have to be careful about that kind of stuff. Peer review is good. We need to support each other in that. And yeah, that's my story about being aware of what type of resources you use.
But by the way, I went to see that movie, Gods of Egypt. And I gotta tell you, I understood everything. For me, that was the most enjoyable movie that I've seen in years, because I sat there and I'm going like, yeah, there's the feather. Yeah, that's a heavy heart. They're buying salvation. Oh yeah, I know what that means because I understand the mythology of ancient Egyptology. Now imagine if you look at that movie and you look at the way they used to believe, that's exactly what Moses is dealing with for 40 years. And they actually believed this stuff. They believed in all of the gods, and the Pharaoh was a god. And if you notice in that movie, the Pharaoh or the leader, the king, is bigger. It's like a god. But they believed there were gods, and they will believe that the sons of gods. And it's interesting. I don't want to start kind of warm here, but when Seth went up to the heavens to talk to Ra, right? And all of a sudden, he killed Ra, and the whole idea was to keep the cosmos, ma'at, to keep the balance of the cosmos, and then all of a sudden show the earth how everybody believed it in the ancient world. The way they believed it. That now people are preaching that the word is, and that comes from the worship of Anu. Anu believed in something else, how the earth was built differently than what it is now. Well, they didn't have satellite pictures, so they didn't know. So they believed those things. So what happens is, by understanding and clarity and going back to its roots, we can better have a balance and not go to and fro to any wind of doctrine of every differences. And by the way, you and I, and how many of us actually go on Facebook and start bashing all the teachers for what they teach? We don't do that. At least I don't. I don't want to do that. I got my opinions about certain things. But one of the things that is a requirement for the group, and you know this, everybody can attest to this, is that we don't go around doing teachings trying to bash other ministries. We may have our positions and our opinions, but I don't think it's befitting of us that we study to be smashing everybody and be the theology police. But if you ask me, I'll tell you what I found. I found the research, I put it on a teaching, but it's never with the purpose to be bashing anybody else. Some of you have actually got upset with me because I'm trying to keep you from doing that, you know. And the whole idea is, listen, why don't we share the information, let other people research it and find it, instead of us trying to impose what we're learning on other people. And that's my position. That's where I'm at. We're learning so much, and we got so much to learn, but if we keep pushing it on people and then correcting everybody and then like bashing somebody who doesn't have all the information, what's good to have all this information when we cannot share it in a manner that is going to edify other people? That's just my take on that. Thank you, Matthew. Daniel, it was your idea, and I want to tell everybody that's watching that Daniel is very important because the first two articles that I read on Suzerain Vassal Treaties by Lopez, you know, he sent to me in an email when I was confronting a very hard situation, either going to defend and bashing somebody in public or putting my focus in the Lord and teach the commandment. And I told him, said, Lord, I'm dealing with this situation. I'm not happy about it, but I'm going to focus on your commandments and I want to know you better. And up to that point, I've done the soul covenant, the blood covenant, and the covenant of the peace, covenant of the pieces, and the threshold covenant. And I was looking for more information. I was doing research for the shoe covenant. Remember that? And then you sent me an article, and when I got home that weekend, it turned me upside down. So a lot of people don't know that. I want to let everybody know that you were one of those people that shared that information that really helped me refocus and go in the direction the Father's taking us. So I want to thank you for that publicly. Go ahead, Daniel.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
This whole thing got started, but I'm a little bit different from the rest of these guys. These guys are the scholars. I just kind of wing stuff. No, seriously, the last 4 years have, like Rico said, they've been pretty amazing. They have, you know, transformed everything that I understand about the Bible, about the scriptures, and, you know, basically everything I thought that I knew about Yeshua. I mean, it's changed my life. So everything that everybody here has said is right on. I do want to make a little bit of an emphasis that, you know, a lot of people that are watching, you know, even myself at times, I still work a full-time job, and a lot of us just don't have the time to study all this stuff the way that we are, you know, and a lot of times it takes away from a lot of things that we're doing at home and that kind of thing. So, you know, all the stuff that we put out is to help those that don't have this kind of time to do what we're doing. So, you know, it's a big deal. You guys hear me? Okay, good. So a couple of things I want to hit on as far as how I actually personally study is, you know, it kind of got all started with the ancient covenant perspective of the suzerain vassal treaties, like Rico mentioned. That was the very first topic that we actually did. And once you begin to look into how ancient nations and ancient kingdoms interacted with one another, and look into the legal aspect of, you know, the treaties and the different types of covenant, the aspect of adoption and all these type of areas, is it's going to open up so many different areas of scripture that you've never seen before. Just to give you an example, in the book of Exodus, we read about how, you know, all the Hebrew boys were cast into the river, you know, by Pharaoh. And, you know, a few chapters later, here comes Moses, and everybody knows that he was a Hebrew, but nobody seems to question why he was actually never, you know, attempted to be killed again. Well, if we don't go back and study the culture and realize, you know, the reason why nobody ever did anything like that is because he survived the trial by water, and which meant that they believed that the river and the bodies of water were actually deities, and they led to the underworld. So if Moses arises out of the river and shows up again, nobody is ever going to attempt to take his life again because he survived the trial by water and the gods deemed him innocent. But we're never going to understand that if you don't go back and study the culture and the concepts of everything that's going on amongst these nations, right? So you always got to look into the geopolitical aspect of what's going on, not only in the ancient Near East, but also in the first century culture. Most of the studies that I'm doing right now have to do with the New Testament because I'm doing a in-depth teaching on the Gospel of John, and I'm learning things just in the last 3 weeks that I've never ever seen before, realizing that New Testament terms mean something completely different than I ever even imagined because I never understood the culture. I never understood the background concepts to the New Testament world. So we have to be able to go back and look into these type of areas to get a better grasp on not only the work of Yeshua, but our own personal identity. A huge question amongst people, believers today, especially around Hebrew roots people and Messianics that are coming into this, is okay, you guys are keeping this Torah stuff, but how does this apply to me? What does it mean for me? Well, I promise you that there is an application to just about every single cultural concept that we are teaching and that we are learning about. So it's a big deal.
So, you there? Can you hear me? All right. So, thank you, Daniel. And it's true. A lot of the things that we're learning in the Brit Hadashah, we're finding out that it's not really what we thought. There is a few other books that I like to recommend as I'm picking up some stuff here that I think you may like. One of the things, also like Matthew said, there's some of those writers that I don't necessarily agree with everything. But one of the things that you must be careful with is with some of the minimalists. A lot of the writers, they are minimalists. They're actually scholars. It's crazy. I don't understand it. But they're scholars, and all they do is use the information to minimize God. Well, who is that? Let me see. Who is that, Matthew?
That was Milgram. He makes a few points that I think go along those lines.
Yes, he talks about that, and like Mendenhall, Mendenhall. Oh man, he wrote this book. I'm looking for it. It's an article. I'm sorry.
Just to give you guys a little bit of background on that, my professor was talking about this. Up until about 1990, you could not get a book published by any major publisher unless you wrote about documentary hypothesis. That was just part of the scholarly world. It was like evolution. You had to buy into this documentary hypothesis, which is minimalist.
Right. So it's like all of a sudden you're reading some of the amazing information about the ancient Near East, and then all of a sudden the conclusion is like you just throw your hands in the air. Go ahead, Daniel.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because we've seen a lot of people that have come into studying the ancient Near East, studying the first century culture and that sort of thing, and they have actually become minimalist. And one thing that you have to make sure that no matter what you are reading, no matter what you are studying, is that there's always a distinction between the pagan gods and Yahweh's kingdom. Okay, just because there may be some sort of, one little snippet that's the same as the ancient Near Eastern culture or people would have believed, it doesn't necessarily mean that Yah is using something pagan. This is absolutely essential to studying cultural context to Scripture.
Oh, that's John Walter's book. That's right. John Walter's book is really, really good. Really good on that. Go ahead, Tyler. Tell me about that one.
No, I think this is the one you were talking about, right? Mendenhall's Ancient Israel's Faith and History.
Oh yeah, but then he wrote another one that he found the information on the Hittites, ancient Near Eastern treaties, right? And then he recognized that the Book of Deuteronomy was written in the context of an ancient Near Eastern structure of a treaty. And he wrote this amazing, and I have it. I can't find it because it's like I read the article on the internet, right? I found it, and I thought, wow, this must be an awesome book. I thought it was probably that thick. So I ordered it on Amazon. It was one of my first books when I ordered them. It was the most expensive book, my Lord. And I thought there for a whole day, man, I mean, if this 3-4 chapters are so good, imagine the whole book. I'm thinking, wow. And I was like, really, I took hours reading it, that short article, because I wanted to learn it. So I go to Amazon and I ordered $100. That hurt me, man. That hurt me real bad. When I get the Amazon, I'm expecting this whole book. All it is a booklet. It was actually the article I had on the internet that I read. And I'm going like, really? And then the next day, I look into Amazon. The book was $50. And then when I look at the little booklet and I see the front page of it, it was 17 cents about 30, 50 years ago. And I'm going like, wow, I don't let anybody borrow that. If I'm going to pay that kind of money, no one's borrowing that book. But anyway, that goes to show you that do I have all the money to throw away on things that no. That book was pivotal, helping us understand certain foundation of ancient treaties that actually lines up with scripture. Just because the guy was a minimalist on another book doesn't mean that the information was not solid. And that's the one thing that we need to weigh it out. Like, for example, you have Roland DeVoe. Roland DeVoe is a very well-known writer. He writes a lot of good stuff, and this is one, the Bible and the Ancient Near East. Really good, and it's easy reading, by the way. He quotes everybody. These are scholarly work. So he quotes his sources. And by the way, that's how I built my library. I built my library because I'm reading an article, and then all of a sudden they're quoting all their sources. Then I noticed that this writer is quoting this article or this book from this writer about this topic. So my assumption is, well, this guy is the authority on that topic. So I go and do research on that book, and then I order the book and I read it, and then I go back to the articles to know what his connections is trying to make. That's how I did it. There's also this one that it was recommended. It's really, really good, actually. It's my latest book. It's called The Complete Gods and Goddesses of Ancient Egypt. Really cool stuff. All right. It's by Thames and Hudson and by Richard Wilkinson. It's really well done, a lot of cool information, and it tells you all kinds of cool stuff. Then I studied the laws of Hammurabi and the laws of Esnunna and all the ancient documents. So I bought this book by Samuel Gringus that is called Laws in the Bible and in early rabbinic collections. So what they do, they connect the ancient Near Eastern laws with biblical law and how the rabbis dealt with those biblical laws. So when you want to make a contrast, like one of the guys was saying, just because some of the laws are similar to the Torah doesn't mean that God is using something pagan. Because when we start talking about righteousness and justice, the whole ballgame changed. Okay? Then you have K.A. Kitchen, which, by the way, in my opinion, one of the best writers, who is not a minimalist. He is pro-Word of God. He did an amazing job on this. I'm still working through it. It's a lot of information. So those are some of the areas that I studied and some of the books that we like to recommend. Where's Ryan? Is he around? Ryan?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, bro. Ryan is a person who, when I started studying this, I gave Daniel and Ryan some homework. I told them, I said, I need help. Will you guys take care of those areas? Research it. Let me facilitate articles, whatever you need, and then make a PowerPoint or something. And they said, well, what do you want us to do with a PowerPoint? I said, I want you to teach it. Well, what do you want us to teach it? I want you to do it on my website. And they were blown away that I would open my website so they can teach also. But my whole idea was, I have an agenda. I wanted to learn. So for me, it was easier for them to do the work, to do the PowerPoint. We talk about it all the time, and then they do the teaching, so I could sit there, and I could also be peer reviewed. And that way they will develop too. So I want to thank them publicly for all the help and to validate information. Go ahead, Ryan.
Hey, thanks. I'm going to just kind of go through a couple things here. Sorry, I was trying to, there's been some questions. So to begin with, I'll just kind of repeat some of the stuff we were talking about on the chat here. I would recommend as a starting resource, if you're just getting into this, start with the IVP Bible Backgrounds Commentary on the Old Testament and the New Testament. Those are pretty cheap. You can get them in paperback for probably $20. They're actually available on eSword, and then, of course, my favorite is on Logos. But I'll show you just a brief, let me pull this over here, thing here. And let's cut to, okay, so I know it's kind of small to see here. Let me try to make it a little bit bigger. So here this is let's go to Leviticus 1, right? And it just gives you like a little bit of commentary, and it doesn't really try to explain anything. It just gives you some cultural background for the IVP Bible Backgrounds Commentary. This one's by Walton Matthews and Havelas, and there's also one on the New Testament. Those are excellent to start off with.
Hey, click on the number of the verses so you can see that right from there. You can see the verse.
Yeah, the way my program's working, it won't show this, but on your screen, but on my screen, whenever I highlight over a verse, it's actually popping up. But the way the program's working right now, it's not going to show it because it's some of the software I'm using here. But that's a really good way to start off with. Also, the the Zondervan Illustrated Bible Backgrounds Commentary. I put these in the chat down here as well. Those are the two I would recommend starting with because they're just going to give you a broad overview. You pick a chapter and it's going to give you little bits and pieces here. And like on my website, I'm doing a series of written articles over the Torah portion, and that's how I actually start out myself. I read the Torah portion, and then I go to these books, and I just read this, but I don't actually use these as sources. I use these as jumping points because they'll list their resources, and then I use that, and I go check out the resources they used, and then I end up writing the article based off of that. The other one, if you're looking for word studies, I'm going to say this. The Strong's is not a good resource. Okay, it's what the Strong's.
You can basically throw it out. I said it.
You can throw it out. What the Strong's is it tells you every single way that word is translated in the King James Bible. It doesn't tell you anything about the context of that word or anything. It's a completely useless resource. What I would recommend, first off,
useless for us.
What's that?
Useless for us right now.
Is what's called the New International Dictionary. Whoa. Hang on, my Siri just thought I was telling it something.
You see, even when you talk, Siri listens.
So this one's called the New International Dictionary of Old Testament Theology and Exegesis, and there's one for the New Testament as well. This is going to be expensive. I think on hard copy it's probably around $100, $150, but it's like a 5-volume set. And so I'll have like the Hebrew word here.
What's the name again?
Say again?
What's the name again?
The New International Dictionary of Old Testament Theology and Exegesis. If one of you guys could type that in the chat, that'd be great. I'll type it in afterwards, maybe. This is, this will tell you the ways it's translated, but then it'll tell you like this is how this word was used at other ancient Near Eastern cultures. This is how this word was used throughout the Old Testament. You got to realize what Jews today speak is not biblical Hebrew, right? They're speaking modern Hebrew, which is actually based off of Mishnaic Hebrew, which is kind of a mixture between Aramaic and Hebrew, biblical Hebrew. And you think about the English language. How many words do you know today that have changed? Right? For example, Psalms 23. We all know how that goes. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Right? How many of you know that that's a poor translation?
Yeah.
That word does not mean like have any desire. It means I will not have a basic need, because the English language has changed since they wrote the King James. Imagine that, but they won't update our modern Bibles because that word, that phrase has become so popular that the Bible wouldn't sell well. That's why, if you check the NASB, the NIV, all of those will say want because it's become the popular translation. So this is a really good resource here as well. So what I wanted to talk about here, and this is something, I have a course on my website on my yeshiva section that's called How to Study Scripture, and I know Dina Dye also has a series called Study to Show Yourself Approved. And in both these courses, we're just going through and trying to show you based on how we've learned how to study, but also based on I know Dina has a doctorate degree. I'm almost done with my master's degree in biblical studies, And so, I'm breaking it down. If you're going to approach a text, how are you going to study it? And my 8 basic steps are: first, preparation to study, right? Prayer, maybe some good music, some Sons of Korah or something like that. The next thing you need to do, and this is the one that for me sometimes I forget to do, is actually read the text. Don't go off and say, "Oh, I know what this says." You need to go back and read the text, because there's been a lot of times I thought I knew what the text says because I'd read it a bunch of times, and then when I read it, I actually found there's some key things that are missing there. Analyzing the text, you need to look at if you're not good at Hebrew or Greek, one of the things you can do is get a couple different copies of the Bible and read through the text and see each version and see where do they differentiate, and then where those versions differentiate, that's where you need to study a little bit further in. You need to establish the context. This is, of course, we all know, reading the verses before, reading them after. What's going on, right? Oftentimes, that's one of those big fallacies that Christianity has sadly gone into, is this idea of a proof text thing. And they'll throw you 5 different proof texts. They're from 5 different books of the Bible, and they seem to indicate that, but then you go and you read that one verse that they're reading, and it's like, that's not what they're talking about at all, right? A lot of people like Bible word studies. One thing I've learned is that we actually need to do Bible concept studies rather than just word studies. One of the things I was just listening to Dina Dye's teaching, and she talks about how she likes to use the word temple for everything, but when she says temple, she says we need to realize that temple includes the tabernacle, it includes the heavenly temple, it includes the Garden of Eden, right? And so all of those things fall within that concept, and studying that together.
Yeah.
Connecting scriptures, and then once you've done all of that work, then you go to the commentaries. Because otherwise you can be led astray, because a lot of times these commentaries, they'll kind of pick and choose stuff, right? But they don't actually, they're taking stuff out of context, and if you've actually read that for yourself, you're going to catch that. And then finally, kind of compiling your research with that. Let me share one last thing here, and then I'll turn it back over to Rico. This is something I've been meaning to do a video on this. Everybody see this picture right here?
Yeah.
How many legs does this statue have? Have you seen this statue before, Rico?
Yes, I have a few times.
How many legs does that have?
I never thought about how many legs it had.
I had never thought about how many legs this had either until I'm reading this book called Poetics and Interpretation of Biblical Narrative. This has 5 legs.
Right.
The statue literally has 5 legs, but this is why it's so important for us to not look at the Bible through our 21st century eyes, because this statue is being taken out of context when we're looking at it from this angle. You see, this statue, you're supposed to either look at it from the front or from the side. If you look at it from the front, it has 2 legs forward, right? Because that is the way that that's how you design a statue. And by the way, this is what we call a cherub. This is what a cherub would have looked like. So from the front, it has 2 legs, but then if you were to turn all the way to the side, it has 4 legs, because that is the cultural understanding of how to portray a statue, any sort of beast. And this is important because why? Especially for the Gospels, right? We have 4 different Gospels. How many of you ever found some things in the Gospels that don't line up together perfectly?
Right.
Right? You've got, for example, in John's Gospel, the episode where Yeshua goes and he drives out the money changers happens well before the time where he's crucified, where in the other 3 Gospels, it happens right before he's crucified. We've, of course, got John, who depicts the Last Supper on the day before Passover, whereas the other 3 Gospels depict it on the Passover night. Why is that? Because of this statue right here, right? They're trying to portray it in a specific context. John is trying to portray Yeshua as the Passover lamb, and so you're going to see a lot of language heavily oriented towards Passover lamb, whereas the other Gospels, Matthew's Gospel is presenting him as the right Messiah, the King. So this is one thing that we really need to try to look at when we're studying Scripture, is think, who was the one who was writing this, and what was his audience, and what message is he trying to get across to his audience, not looking at it from a 21st century perspective.
By the way, that's exactly how I try to. Thank you for the statue thing there. That was good. This is why I try to, when I look at a text, for example, I'm doing the research on Corinthians. How many hours have we read on the Bruce Winter's books, and Jerome Neary and Molina and all the other writers that we spent for the last 2 years? Patronage, ancient honor and shame, challenge and repose, all the stuff that we've been teaching on, which out of that foundation, we have all kinds of other things that come out of. Well, I started doing a teaching on the caste system, something that we never thought about until I went to that conference in Shavuot. Remember that, guys? We were there, and we were in a bad mood, and I got home, and I said, there's something missing, and I began to do research, and I went on the internet, because I remember doing a research based on a comment that a lady made on one of my teachings on honor and shame. She was from India, and I told her, I said, this teaching is going to make sense for you, because in India they have a caste system, and throughout the teaching, she was helping me, explaining the caste system, because she was from there. Well, I remember that, and when I got back from Shavuot, I went into and I Googled caste system in ancient Rome. Poof, all this information came up. And I did not know that, which opened the way for imperial cult, imperial worship, all that stuff, and that led me to the Gospel of, the letter of Galatians and Ephesians, and now doing the research on Corinthians. So this is how I go about it. If I'm going to talk about the Corinthians, I'm not just going to take a verse from chapters 2, chapters 4, chapters 15, chapters whatever, and formulate a whole theology out of that. I'm going to take the introduction first. Who were they? Who was the people? Was it a Roman or was it a Greek city? Was it composed of only Greek people or Roman citizens, or what was it? Where is it located? Listen, you ask 99% of the people, and you ask them, where was the city of Corinth? Do you know what the Isthmian games are? Do you know what the main god of the Corinthians were? Do you know what a Corinthian girl means from an idiom from the 1st century? Do you know how important it was for the people to go through Corinth in order to get to Rome? They don't know. They only know what Paul says in Corinthians. And they formulate a whole, by the way, the whole thing about the covering of the head of men and women in chapters 11 of Corinthians have absolutely nothing to do with Judaism. And you verify this, guys. It had all to do with imperial cult and the way that the believers would appear if they would do the practice the way the Romans were doing it. So I ask, who are the people? Where are they found? When was he there? Why was he there? What is the problem? What is the question? What is the answer? What is the architecture of the housing? What is the model of the city? What was the agora? What was the marketplace? What were the gods? Wait a minute. I mean, Ephesians alone, they worship over 50 gods. So which one was the #1 god of the Ephesians? And by the way, in chapters, I think, 19 of the book of Acts, the blacksmith were really mad at Paul because, he was running them out of business because the message was so powerful that they're renouncing Diana, Artemis. So now we got a whole foundation that the book of Acts tells us. Gallio, Gallio was another proconsul, but one of the head guys in Corinthians, and we know because Paul was taken to that guy, so the Jews accused him, and Paul says, he told about Paul, leave him alone because, that has to do with Jewish law, that has nothing to do with Roman law. Wait a minute, they living in Corinth? Paul is accused of something, and the main guy there in Corinthians says, this has nothing to do with us. You deal with it according to your customs. But wait a minute, how come the Jews have preference in how they worship their God in Corinthians? Then you have to go back and start studying all kinds of stuff about the benefits of Augustus and the decrees that Augustus made in regards to the Jews in the kingdom. All of a sudden, the study of Corinthians is not that easy. And this is just the introduction. So what I'm trying to convey to you guys, not to make it difficult, is that let us stop taking one verse here, one verse there, one verse there, and formulate an argument and argue with people when you don't know who the people were, what the geography was, what is all those mechanisms that makes the whole story. And that's just my approach to how I study this. And now I got the privilege to have one of my teachers, Joseph Good, join us. He's part of the peer review. He is an expert on the tempo. And by the way, you know the way I showed you all those books, giving you references? I learned it from him. He is the one that really impressed me when I will begin to listen to him. He will quote all the sources, and when I go get the book, it's right there. And even today, I spent, I think, I don't know if an hour or so, talking to him about verifying some things about the feast. He took me through like 3 resources and the verses. Go to this resource, go to Menachot, go to this one, go to that one, go to that one, and go to the verses and put it together. And by the way, Joe, thank you, because I did that teaching in Spanish, and I thought it worked really well. So I want to thank you for that. So I want to introduce to you Joe Good, and I hope he gives a glimpse of how his method of study is and how he goes about it.
First, Rico, I have developed my own method of study over the past 30 years, and I had some challenges because the majority of the people that I was going to be speaking to were going to be in Israel and going to be experts in the field of the temple. Primarily the rabbis that work specifically on the temple. And so I had to somewhat level the playing field in order to be able to sit down with these guys and to discuss with them. So first off, whenever I research something, I do my research before I start to reach any kind of conclusions. In fact, I will spend up to 3 or 4 years compiling research material before I start having my own opinions on what it's saying. I will take keywords, and for instance, if I'm researching a particular building, a particular ceremony, even something that does along the line, say, like the word shliach, which is in the Gospels, apostle, it's a sent one back in the Tanakh, or the word basara, which is going to be good news or good tidings. I will type it into a program that I have in Hebrew, putting wildcards, and I'll search all the text from the Tanakh, from the Mishnah, the Tosefta, the Talmud Bavli, the Talmud Yerushalmi, Mishneh Torah, and the Siddurim. Then I will take these. It comes back in Hebrew. It doesn't come in English. I will go through and I'll expand each one. I'll read it. Generally, what I'll do, because I can read Hebrew, and I can search in Hebrew, I can work in Hebrew, my Hebrew is not good enough to be certain that I'm reading it correctly. So I will take and let's say that it says my first source is going to be in Zevakim 2:3 from the Mishnah. And so I will go to Zevakim in English, and I will copy that into a document. And generally, when a typical document for me, let's say I'm researching, say, the Soreg. The one that I did on the Soreg was like 7,000 pages. So I have the Hebrew, I have the English.
Let everybody know what the Soreg is, so that people can know what you mean.
The Soreg is a wall that went around the inner courtyards, that if you had not been sprinkled with the ashes of the red heifer, or if you were not halakhically Jewish, you could not go beyond. Now, from that, from the word Soreg, I also look for synonyms and related rabbit trails. and I will incorporate those into the search doing the same process, and I build a document that is just literally, it's going to be, you know, this big, and I'll go through and read this whole thing before I start arriving at conclusions. So it's a slow process. It is one that teaches you the material. I do not read Christian commentaries. I might read a Christian commentary once every 10 years because for the most part, there's been too much that was incorporated in, and so I keep that at a distance. I read very few Jewish commentaries. I work primarily from the texts themselves.
Yeah, that's because you're focusing a lot on the temple, so that many people, you want to go directly from the resource in regards to that, because that's your specialty, right?
Yes, but I also use this in anything that I'm studying.
Gotcha.
So whether it's temple or not temple. Now, what you said before, Rico, the journalistic questions: who, how, what, where, when, why. You always want to do that with each text that you look at. In the temple, there's a ceremony that deals with the barley, where the barley is the coarsest grain, and you have to have the finest flour to make the barley loaves. So it's going to be beaten, it's going to be scorched, it's going to be winnowed, it's going to have all of these things that are done to it, and then it passes through sieves. And there's 13 sieves it has to pass through. So it has to become so fine that when the treasurer of the temple puts his hands into the flour, he takes it out, people can't see any flour sticking to his hand. That's basically what I try to do with whatever I'm researching, is take it through a process of filtering. Now, to me, I don't want to rush. I don't mind putting things on back burners, but I feel that we need to research stuff out to a ridiculous degree. First off, you know, in my case, whenever I go in and I sit down with rabbis that are the leading experts on these fields, I have to know as much as they know, and on my particular whatever I'm going to be talking about, I have to know more than what they know. And so I have to read everything in order to go in and sit down with them.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's pretty interesting, because you're not dealing with just any audience. You're dealing with highly educated in those fields. So
yes,
they're not going to respect a Christian scholar, because in Judaism they're not going to look at that aspect, you know, to look for the resource, because in reality, you know what I mean. They're looking more for what is more concrete.
If I can add something.
Sure.
One of the biggest things that I would say to you is, number one, you need to build a good library. It has to be the best of sources. So, for instance, if you're going to purchase a Mishnah, you can buy a Neusner Mishnah for like $50. You can buy a Danby, which is a 1 volume, for about $100. You can buy a Blackman, which is 6 volumes, for maybe $150. Don't waste your time with that. Save your money. He just held up the Kahati Mishnah. If you can't afford the full set, you can buy a full set for about $300, $350. But if you can't afford the full set, then purchase the volumes that you're interested in. Purchase volumes that deal with topics that you're familiar with, like Passover, Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, things that will be easy, because you have to work in them before you learn how to use them. Yeah. Because they're not going to approach it like people here in the United States, like in the Western world. You can't read it like it was written here. Now, you have to read it. First off, it has to go back at least 2,000 years. Number two, it has to come out of the Jewish mindset. Now, here's a trap. A lot of Jewish authors are writing as though it were written today. A lot of Jewish authors have been influenced by Christianity or by Reform Judaism.
Right.
So you want to go back and you want to capture what was there, how did they approach this at that time. I'll give you an example. You have the scriptures. Okay, so the scriptures are going to be in Hebrew. Now you could go to the Targumim, the Targum Onkelos for the Torah. You could go to the Targum Yonatan ben Uziel. Both of these are going to give you the basically a paraphrase of how they saw that scripture back 2,000 years ago. So that becomes valuable. You can go to the Pseudepigrapha, you can go to the Apocrypha, you can go to all of these various things. You can look up at the Mishnah and the Talmud, look at the commentary. You need to get into Jewish mindset. That's why I use Jewish text. And that's why I try to regulate myself to them, because I want to pick up what are the expressions they're using. You know, if it says open the gates, does that mean something? Yeah, it does. It means it's Rosh Hashanah. If it says close the gates, then it's going to mean it's Yom Kippur.
Right.
You don't pick that up out of a lot of your text. So you have to go back to the original text for that.
So you're doing this for the temple, I was trying to do for the ancient Near East, go as far back as we can to the time that it was done.
Exactly.
Perfect. By the way, a lot of my library I built because of you. I kept saying, Joe, what is that book? And I kept ordering it. My wife looked at me, she goes, Rico, another book? But let me tell you something. I've been blessed. I have the opportunity to build a library, and I know it's an expense. But when you are a Torah teacher and you try to teach about the Word of God, to me, these are the tools of learning. This is not an expense because I want to spend money and waste it away because they look cool. I mean, I've touched probably every book here. I've read a page to chapters to half the book and the complete book on it, because to me, I owe it to the audience to be prepared. And even then, I'm still learning. And even then, I need teachers. Because even when I read something, sometimes I'm looking, like Ryan mentioned that, sometimes we look at it for certain perimeters, and we need to have a peer review so that we can learn and we can compare notes, making sure that we're not reinventing the wheel. Now, you know, in regards to the research that Joe was making, you know, to the Jewish people, if he quotes a Christian scholar, he's not going to have the same credibility. If he quotes Josephus from this guy, they might not listen to him. But if he quotes Josephus from the Loaves right here, then they might consider it, because they look at credibility. Just like if we do a research paper and we start quoting people who have been renowned in that area, we're going to get more credibility the same way. So.
Let me show you something. Let me grab a book. I'll be right back.
That's typical Joe right there. We got a few more minutes, guys, so when Joe comes back and he shows us, we are going to bring it to a close. What I like to do, if it's okay with the whole group, to maybe come back on the 23rd of March and then take a topic and expand a little bit on it. I think that we're looking into honor and shame and patronage and, you know, all the nice topics we're looking into, so we may touch on that. Go ahead, Joe.
All right. Rico, have you seen this?
No.
All right. This is Antiquities of the Jews.
In the Hebrew, right?
In Hebrew, right. And so it's all in Hebrew. It's not vocalized.
Yeah.
So there's no vowels. But what I do when I have Josephus is I'm going to read first from the Loeb, okay? But once I've read from the Loeb, I'll look at also the Whiston, which you held up before, the one volume. And by the way, if you need to have a Whiston, okay? The rabbis will not let us use the Whiston. They don't trust it. They think it's been touched by Christianity. Now, there are two numbering systems, okay? So one is what we call the Whiston system. Now, Whiston is the author who did this in the 1700s. The second system is from this collection of books. There's about 15 volumes, maybe. And you need to get Wars. You don't have Wars.
I don't have Wars.
You also need to have Against Apion and the Life of Flavius Josephus. Now, these, there is a different numbering system, the Loeb system, okay? So you need to become familiar with it. Scholars use the Loeb system, not the Wisdom system. Now, if you buy the Wisdom, this is the volume you want from Kriegel Publications. It's going to be edited by Paul L. Maier, M-A-I-E-R. The reason is he uses both numbering systems. And so you can do a cross-reference of your numberings. That becomes valuable. Now, when we read it here in the Josephus and the Loeb, okay, then the next step is to take it to the Hebrew. And then we read it in the Hebrew. We actually solved a major question on the temple by the way that Josephus had worded it, but we could not see it in the English or the Greek. It had to be in the Hebrew. Once we saw it in the Hebrew, it made sense.
Gotcha.
Okay?
Yes.
So it takes a while to learn to use these resources. You develop people that are more skilled than you in Hebrew, that you can reference, that you can call them up and say, help me with this. And so, you know, what you're studying, it's important. I mean, it is not only important for you to know, but you have a responsibility to those you teach.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter how long it takes. Forget time. Time is not relevant.
Yeah.
What's relevant is truth and arriving at truth.
I agree with that. I really appreciate it, Joe, because I think we all have benefit from some of the things that I've learned from you, and I try to pass on to the group, and I'm learning from them. You know, Ryan has done some research on sacrifices, and, you know, Daniel has done great stuff on cosmology. I was able to recommend to him some videos that he didn't know that were there on logos that I hope he gets, because it's only going to help and enhance our understanding of what we're trying to do. Guys, listen, I want to thank every single one of you for being here and sharing your method of study. We all have our ways of studying, but it's interesting that we all get together when we do teachings. We always come to a lot of the same conclusions. So obviously, we are being led by the Spirit of the living Elohim. And, you know, it's always good that I want you all to know that you're my peers, my friends, my mentors, and teachers. I don't look at you as students, or I'm Joe's student, but he's also my friend. And every time I call him to a question, he always gives me graciously a lot of time and is willing to help me grow and get better. And today, a whole bunch of Spanish-speaking people in my Teshuvah.tv got an idea of some controversial topic because he was able to help me. And that's something that I really appreciate. So I want to thank every single one of you. Ryan, you have something to add?
Yeah, let me just take a minute here just to answer one quick question. Someone had asked about if I use the Logos resources. And I just wanted to show you guys, I don't make any money off Logos for doing this, but like the other day, Rico asked me about cosmic geography, right? So on Logos, I can just go into a search for everything, type in cosmic geog, or no, it was sacred space. That's what it was.
Sacred space, sacred, and then you have to put "and" in capital letters.
Well, or you can put it in parentheses like this. So I do this, right, and give it a second here, and now let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger here. Here we go. Now on my library here, I've got 575 results in 62 different books, right? So, I mean, I can just sit here. This is why I personally prefer to purchase books. If they have the book in Logos, I'll purchase it here because, you know, I can just type in a keyword and instantly search for it.
If you go back up, Ryan, real quick. Put it by count. Right there, a little higher at the end, at the top. The whole resource there, by count. Click on by count real quick.
Oh.
And then what it does, it tells you the resources that has them the most. So it can give you a direct reference to who has the most that talks about that topic. And in this case, you're going to see that Walton has a lot of that already. So that's something that I learned recently, and
I didn't realize we could do that.
You see?
Thanks.
I was able to teach you something on logos. But by the way, logos, in my opinion, if you're not a student, it can be very expensive. I went back to school just so I could save some money. So anyway, I was able to get in and get some books, and we share a lot of articles. I don't know if you noticed, but I go on Facebook and I put in a lot of articles from some of the resources that we have that are credible and try to share them with you guys. So again, I want to thank you all for being here tonight. Hopefully some of you out there watching hopefully will be blessed by some of the resources we're trying to give you. I don't know if you can see me, but can you guys see me at all?
I can see you.
Okay. Anyway, so, you know, I want to thank every single one of you for coming, and I pray that all of you that were watching tonight get a glimpse of how we study and how we come up with certain things, some of the resources that we recommend to you. And if you want to join WIT-Talmidim, you know, go into one of our websites. You know, we have websites. We do studies. We share our articles. And also, you can go to Joseph Good's website. Joe, tell them your website on the temple so they can go check it out.
JerusalemTempleStudy.com.
If you want to know about the temple, he is my temple teacher. I've learned a great deal from him. If you want to know about, you know, understanding everything that you need to know in the temple and how to find it, he is great. So, I mean, please give him an opportunity to share what he knows. And you want to know some areas, sacrifices, Ryan has great teaching. Anyway, we all have our gifts, and I pray that we continue to always work together. And I want to thank you for joining me, guys. Hopefully we're able to meet up again on the 23rd of March. If that sounds good for you guys, can you make it? Maybe. Let me know later, but let's plan on the 23rd of March and a topic to be determined, and then we'll go from there.
23rd of March. Wait. That's Purim.
Okay, so I guess that's not the day.
Yeah, 23rd of March is Purim.
All right, so we'll pick another day. We'll announce it on Facebook. And thank you, Joe, for, you know, making us aware of my lack of understanding of the calendar here. All right, guys. Have a great night. Shalom to all of you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Joe, Daniel, Matthew, Ryan, Tyler, RC. Thank you, guys, really. I really appreciate the time that you've given us for sharing with everybody how we go about studying and how much we're learning. Lehitraot, toda rabba, Shavua tov, and we'll see you next time. Shalom.
Shalom, shalom.